Hello, everyone. Anything to anybody?
Hello.
This Chromebook that I'm on, it's starting to fail now. The software companies out there refuse to operate with these old software systems. So when you
Yeah.
talk about the technology, it's interesting how nobody thinks that, well, the technology of old is not compatible with the technology of today, which will not be compatible with the technology of tomorrow. And to me, that kind of defeats the whole purpose. I mean, is that progress? Are you? I mean, and maybe it is, and maybe that's a lesson we should learn with the fiat system in our government. Maybe it's time to throw the baby out with the bathwater and start with a clean sheet of paper with everything.
Okay, so Amigo, what I would say is I agree with everything you said, but it's not happening.
Oh, I
So,
understand that there's too many people
yeah,
who are making money on the current system.
right. And well, yeah, I mean, there is going to be a reset. There is going to be, it's actually the reset's happening as we speak. It's just gradual.
Well, the
We are
name
going,
reset, the name reset is deceptive. Okay.
it is. So, for lack of term, we're going to purely digital currency. We're going to CBDCs. We're going to everything's going to be tokenized on the blockchain. All of it. That's where we're going. Your
I
house,
don't agree.
100%.
I'm not saying they
100%.
won't try. I'm not saying they won't try. I'm saying it will
We're,
fail.
we're going there. No, it's not going to fail. It's happening as we speak. Everything's going to, I'll go on record for this one. Everything's, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm not afraid to be wrong. Everything's going to be digitized. Everything. Everything's going to be a CBDC. They're going to be able to track everything you do, everything you buy, ever bought, ever sold,
No,
whatever,
I want to go back.
by
What that
design.
guy Raul Paul said is what I started with. Well, Bitcoin's already been around 14 years. What does it have to do to prove
Correct.
that it's the future? Well, I started laughing when he said that because 14 years? That's nothing. Plus,
Well,
how many,
well,
let me finish my thought, please. How many times have we said in our discussions, wow, I never knew the Fed could do that. Wow, they carried this off a lot longer than I thought it was possible. That's all this is. That's all this is. This is a giant Ponzi bubble that has been inflated through the debasement of the existing infrastructure of currencies. And that's what we're watching. And so Bitcoin has so far proven that it's just another speculative asset that has taken advantage of this bubble expansion. That's all that's been proven. That's it. And it's the thing with the Ponzi is the party continues until it doesn't. And then when it doesn't, you do not want to be the last man standing. You want to
so
be the
you're
first
saying
one out that door.
so you're saying that future of Bitcoin eventually is going to go to zero.
No, I'm not saying it's going to zero. The future's unknown. But I do believe that right now, I think there's no denying that people buy crypto as a speculative asset. They want to make more money than they put into it.
Um, so um, a fair portion of people do want to make the fast money off trading and all that, but there's I believe, a sizable portion as well that see it as a long-term uh,
No,
thing and
Dan,
hold.
that's what they've been told to believe. They don't really believe that.
I
Most people
well,
don't really believe that.
I do. I'm one of those people.
Well, then I think Peter Schiffer's right. I think you're a fool because
Well,
because
you
because
might be right.
there
I don't
is
think so. I
nothing.
think I think you're wrong, but we'll see. We'll see who's right.
What's
Since you put it that way.
it's the same thing with tulip mania. If you bought the tulip at $1 and sold it at 1,000, you made money. So you were
Okay,
right.
so we live in a electronic and digital world. Just use your common sense. You don't have to be a technology expert. We're now on Web 2.0, which is the Internet of Information. We're going to Web 3.0, which is
And
going to be the
I
internet
addressed that. I addressed that at the
of,
very
of,
beginning about
of
how
value
just because technology
and
is
money.
advancing doesn't mean that your current paradigm is the right one. It's the right one at this moment in time. And that's the
I
mistake
agree.
people make is
Yeah,
they think that
I
what they
agree.
believe in today is going to translate to tomorrow.
So what I said earlier is it's a progression. Technology is a constant progression. But the difference is you said something a couple of minutes ago, 14 years you cited.
No,
The problem is,
Raul Paul cited that.
yeah, you were citing him, but I agree with him. 14 years actually is a long time in technology terms. Moore's law, Moore's law is about a year to a year and a half. And actually, Moore's law of a year and a half doesn't even apply anymore. It's
You,
more like
you,
6 months,
you ignored the most important part of what I just countered to that.
which is what?
Do I really have to repeat myself? Do you have the retention of a flea? Come on. What I said was everything has inflated over the last 14 years because of
I
the
heard that.
currency
I
debasement.
heard that. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
I heard that.
it's like the every boat rises when the tide rises.
Okay.
So Bitcoin is only a speculative asset because it is at this moment in time where Bitcoin or a crypto would succeed.
I don't agree. I don't agree with
Of
both
course.
statements.
And that's why
I don't agree.
Bitcoin is not
I
absolute.
also believe, I'll give you another example. I think XRP is the future for cross-border settlements.
I know you
It's
do.
being more and more onboarded with central banks around the world. And you're going to see XRP go from 50 cents to $1 to $5, $10. XRP will go to $1,000 or higher.
My
It's a
point
matter
is
of time.
everything today
And
is
not because out of pure bubble, out of pure utility, because it's going to replace an antiquated system called Swift.
everything today is a speculation. Everything.
Um, um,
Everything.
so you could argue yes and no. Within everything in today, there
Like
are
those
things
people
that
who
are
bought
more.
commercial real estate 5 years ago who thought it was the safest thing you could invest in. Where are they now?
Well, in their defense, they didn't know COVID was coming. They didn't know people were going to be locked down for 3 years
I
and that the
understand.
economy
That's my
destroyed.
point. You're proving my
Yeah,
point. Same thing
yeah.
with the people who bought multi-unit housing. I can't lose.
Well, okay, so we live in the real world. We're both adults. There's risk to everything. We know this. That's inherent. I don't see what's your point. There's risk to everything. There's no 100% guarantee except fucking dropping dead and paying taxes. You know that.
Yeah.
That's my answer to that. There's risk with everything. So you've got to try to match your own personal risk tolerance to whatever it is you're thinking about getting involved in. That's my answer. That's the best you can do. And
Yeah.
and hope that you made the
and
right
the,
decision to your point.
and the fact is, and I
That's all you
think
can do.
and I think it's coming out more and more that because this Ponzi scheme, this system that we've had for the last couple hundred years, and specifically for the last 50 years
I agree.
since currency has been backed by nothing, that
Amen. I agree. I
okay,
agree with that.
so the powers that be that control everything are going to get even nastier about trying to hurt anybody who's trying to do something different. Okay,
I
and
don't
so
argue with that. No argument. No argument
yeah,
at all. No
and that's
argument.
why we
Yeah.
see
No,
all
I
these
agree. Yeah. Oh
wars.
yeah. Oh yeah. I agree with that. Yeah. No, they will. The fangs. You think the fangs are out now? Oh God. Oh yeah.
So you put something into, so for example, an interest rate, right? When we were children, an interest rate was 5, 6, 7% in just a simple savings account.
Absolutely. I remember it clearly.
Over the history of mankind, right? Interest rates have been tied to time, right? Been tied to the value of the store of wealth. And so your savings, your time had value. But
Present and future value of money. They have equations for it in finance.
and then government and these banks, the powers that be, realized that there was so much debt in the world and so many things that had zero real value in the world. Okay. Listen, if you bought a house for $1 million, Dan, and the market decided it was worth 100,000, you still have a house to live in, right?
Yeah.
So as long as you didn't leverage yourself, you could live there for the rest of your days. Now, if you went out and bought an apartment complex for $10 million and it's worth $1 million, and you're leveraged, you're forked, right?
I agree.
Okay. And that's the point that we need to be at today as average people. Since we're, like you always say, we're riding the bus. We're not driving the bus.
Absolutely.
And to
Absolutely.
put all of our money into one single thing is crazy. And that's what a lot of people have done. And that's what a lot of people have done with their homes.
Probably true, because the average bear, that's true. Their home is their biggest
and even though I said,
asset, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Even though I said, hey, it doesn't matter as long as you can live there. The only problem with the home is people don't realize this. That property you're sitting in right now, you don't own it. It's not the bank who owns it. It's the local government who owns it.
Ultimately, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Don't pay the property taxes. Yeah. Yeah, the sheriff shows up with a fucking lock to your own door, new lock.
It's happened.
I know that. That's why I said it. Yeah, I've seen it on videos. Can you imagine a sheriff showing up to your home, popping the lock, putting in a new lock, and telling you, which I've seen it in videos, you have 24 hours. That's what they say to you. 24 hours to vacate the premises.
Sometimes they give you 24 minutes. They just say,
I don't know how.
Oh, yeah, they show up with a group of people. They say, you got to go out now. Take what you can carry and go. It's all forfeited. It's all forfeited.
That's scary.
Because they gave you previous notice. Be out by this date.
Oh, yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah. That's scary.
The point is that we are in a world where we every year, and a lot of people don't believe this, but since 9/11 voided our constitutional rights. Do people realize that?
With the Patriot Act and stuff, ultimately, yeah.
The NDAA.
No, they don't. The average bear? No. In America? No, they don't.
So they can take. They have always, through eminent domain and everything else, they've always been able to find a way to take your property and your money with bail-ins, bailouts. Okay, but now they can take our lives and legally justify it, Dan, just by calling you a terrorist. That's all they do. So my point is it's very difficult to think long-term and say, I know this is going to be something that is an asset that is going to protect me for the rest of my life. Like, I think that's where Peter Schiff is wrong about gold, right? I mean, gold is going to have, it's like, if we take a snapshot in time, Dan, we will be on that snapshot in time, whether it's a day, a minute, a week, we will be right or we will be wrong, kind of like trading options, right? I can't tell you how many times I've been right with the trade, but I lost money because I was wrong with the time.
Yeah.
And that's really, and now as you can attest to, and I can attest to, and many people can attest to, we are starting to really notice now the debasement of the currencies. Now it's really the steam is starting to pick up, where now
it's getting real.
It's always been real, but now people are noticing it because most people still believe in the old paradigm of the American dream, the American way. I mean, that was a Ponzi, folks, and the boomers rode it all the way down.
100%.
And they willingly wrote it. They knew they were on a Ponzi.
My parents, till this day,
they think they're geniuses.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Well, wouldn't you? You've been rewarded.
My own mother till this day fights me tooth and nail, calls me an asshole. Literally calls me an asshole.
And that will tell us, I can tell you where most people are going to lose everything. It's the buy the dippers, because the buy the dippers have been rewarded up until they've been rewarded every time for buying the dip in property, buying the dip in the stock market, into Tesla, Apple, Nvidia. When it drops, buy it. It's a bargain. And at some point, when this house of cards comes apart, Dan, that's a Ponzi. When this house of cards, all it's going to take, that game Jenga.
Yeah. Pull
You remove if you remove Jenga, for those folks who don't know, basically what you do is you build this tower out of these wood blocks, and you build it up. And obviously at the beginning, there's no problem because there's no danger because you're building it up. But when you start getting up a couple inches, all of a sudden the structure starts to sway. And the game is you have to remove a piece from the existing structure and put it on top somewhere. Well, that becomes more dangerous as more weight is on top. And that's where we are now. We have so much debt and that's the other thing people don't realize. When you create debt, how do you pay back? Dan, if you have a base system of $1 million and you take out a debt for $1 million and you want to pay back the $1 million, where's it coming from? Because when you eliminate debt, it goes to zero. It's gone. That's why these are Ponzi's. They can never go down, because the minute it starts to come down, it falls apart because you can't feed the beast. If I had $1 million and I took out $1 million, now I pay back the $1 million, I've got zero.
Yeah.
So what does this mean?
Well,
okay.
It's a debt system.
Okay. It means that none of us know. Like Dan and I were arguing about, do I know? I mean, I have Bitcoin. I have crypto. Why? Because I consider it as something that people believe in and the price is going to go up. So I speculate. I believe that I will make money. I believe that if I put in $1,000, I'm going to get $10,000, right? That's why I invest in it. Okay. And it's the same thing with different stocks and different commodities. If I buy oil, well, that does nothing for me other than if I make money. And why is that important? Because money in a bank, for once, we at least get 5% now. But think about it. If the bank is paying you, or the government is paying you 5.5%, you're losing money. You're losing money because they're
100%. 100%. Yeah, because
they're only paying you 5% because they can't attract anything for any less.
So the hurdle rate that people don't understand, the current hurdle rate is about.
Can you define hurdle 15%. Rate, please?
Yeah, I was going there. What do I mean by hurdle rate, guys? Hurdle rate is basically overall inflation. It's not running at 4.9% or 5% that the government's telling us. It's more like 15%, right?
Hurdle rate, the treadmill.
Some people, I have people in my family that battle me on this, and I'm like, oh, really? Then tell me what price of freaking eggs have gone up like 3 times in the last year. How come homeowners insurance has gone up 25%? How come people's property taxes have gone up 30%, right? Really? We're at 5%? Really? Like food, energy, and housing, the 3 most basic things the last time I checked, you needed,
right,
have all gone up well over 5%, triple that, if not more. Unless you want to live in the woods in a freaking tent, guys, and boil your own water to make it potable. You need food, energy, and housing. And those
are the 3 things they ignore the most.
And oh, by the way, the CPI seems to neglect that. That's why that index looks good all the time, because they just happen to, by chance, forget about those three major things. Again, the last time I checked, in any modern economy, progressive economy, to use Hillary Clinton's words, you need those three things, right? Unless you want to go buy a pup tent over at Dick's Sporting Goods and live down by the river. And the problem with that is, after a week, you'll be kicked out by the local authorities because you're not on some land where you're paying taxes. So you better, go live in the Adirondacks out in the middle of nowhere, like Ted Bundy or somebody.
Okay, so let's transition now. The reality is, this is why I think so many people. This is why I think there's so much chaos and turmoil in our world, because there's no longer that smooth transition for the future that when we were born existed. We had
our parents had the smooth transition, 100%.
But when we were born, it was still there. The illusion of it was still there.
So here's what I'll say real quick. The baby boomers got the full benefit of that, to your point. The Gen Xers that came after the baby boomers, the boomers gave birth to us, we're the Gen Xers, guys, for those younger folks out there. We didn't get the full benefits. I'd say we got part of our generation might have got the full benefit. Part of our generation isn't. We've got a foot on each side of the fence as Gen Xers. That's what makes us unique out of all the demographics in this country, in my opinion. Then after the Gen Xers, you have the millennials.
It's like before cell phones, before technology.
Yep, exactly. That's all they've known is getting it pushed in the mouth. And then after them, you've got the Gen Zers. That's all they've ever known is technology and cell phones. The Gen Xers are the only demographic that have had a foot on each side of the fence in terms of pre-technology and now post-technology, to Dave's point. We grew up without the internet, without computers, but then we saw it come in our lifetime. So we've been on both sides of the fence. No other generation has. And as a result, part of our generation has been able to prosper, as I did at one point, like the boomers, but no longer. And then probably another part of our generation is on the other side of the fence, which is struggling like everybody thereafter. And that's what folks like my parents, I cite them as an example, don't understand. They don't understand the paradigm. They constantly make comments to me. Why
they don't need to understand it.
No, I understand that.
It's only when your survival depends on something do you need to understand it.
Well, okay, and there's truth to that, but when I get comments like, "Why are you struggling? Why are you floundering? Why are you waffling around?" I feel like saying, "Do you have any fucking idea what's going on?" Like,
you just answered yourself. No, they don't.
Typical.
No, they don't.
No, they don't. I understand that, but then my question to them is, well, then you don't know what's going on in America. I do. I watch MSNBC. That's the answer.
Well, we're getting into we're going down a path that we don't want to go, because we're talking about fiduciary responsibility and why that is the core of that is why the United States is the Titanic, because we as a citizenry placed our trust into the wrong people, and the people who were in power did not live up to its treason. In essence, the people who were in power and wrote this, you could argue, well, they were just wrong. They just made mistakes. No, they profited from their decisions. They sold out the country for their own personal gain. And that's a form of treason. And that is treason. There's only one punishment for treason.
So sedition, the last I knew.
And so that is, unfortunately, it means that the Titanic, when it hit that iceberg, there was nothing anybody could do to save it. You had one responsibility, and that was to get yourself and your family to a lifeboat. That was it, or you drowned. What do they call the zero-sum choices, X0, whatever, there's a term for it, but it's a very simple thing. It's either black or it's white. And that's where we're at now. Is unfortunately, most people haven't realized yet that the decision is going to come down to it's very simple. Either you're going to live or you're going to die. Deagle 25, right? So, and that's probably what those people saw.
That's a good point.
So
I hope it's not quite at that level, but I'm not willing to argue with you too much about it either.
yeah, so that's why these are very difficult times, because people are relying on their old paradigm, and that's where you and I, Dan, have gotten our teeth kicked in. Is we've bought and we've held something because we thought we were right, when in reality we were just way too early. And I'm not sure there's a way to combat that, because we're like right now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is because Dan and I, frequently go back and forth. And if anybody who trades or looks at the price of anything, Dan, I'm not in the US anymore, but has the price of gas gone up over the last year or two for your car?
Yes, it has. Let me put it this way. This is a true statistic I heard the other day. When Biden took office, not that I'm pointing at Biden per se, but I'm just a reference point. When he took office, gas was approximately $1.99 a gallon. It's now about $3.50 a gallon throughout the U.S. If you go to California, it's even worse. A gallon of gas in Cali right now is like $5.20. And there's parts of California where gasoline is over $6 a gallon.
Well, that's all taxes related because
of their green whatchamacallit initiative.
Well, all I'm saying is
taxes.
People notice the price of gas, the price of eggs, their insurance.
Exactly.
But most people, unless they're in the trade or they're trading, or they're an electrician or a plumber, they don't notice when the price of copper doubles. They don't notice when the price of silver doubles. Okay.
Commodities that we rely on day to day. Good point.
Okay.
That's right.
And so that's what's happening behind the scenes. All of these things are going higher. Why? Because a lot of these people who are miners, like the uranium miners, well, who the hell needs uranium? Who gives a shit? Well, guess what? A lot of the world gets their energy from uranium through nuclear power. And for years, miners had to pay like $60 a pound to dig that shit out of the earth, process it, get it ready. And they were selling it for 20. And so how many miners out there are going to continue to dig something out of the ground for 60 and sell it for 20?
Yeah, it's called you go out of business, right? So to your point, amigo, I mean, this is what people don't understand. The average bear doesn't get that. Your standard of living, particularly in the U.S., and lifestyle is totally predicated on a non-sexy industry that's called mining at large. Copper, go through your house. There's a lot of copper in it, particularly pipes. Now, a lot of it's been replaced to an extent with PVC, whatever. Nickel is important.
Well,
people are like,
it's called electrical wiring.
Yeah, silver, gold. What do I need silver and gold for? Do you own a cell phone, Skippy? Do you have an Apple cell phone that you love and that you're glued to all day long? Yeah, I do. Guess what? There's silver in there. There's probably some gold in there too. Okay, so 2023 demand for silver was 1.2 billion ounces. They were only able to fulfill 800 million ounces, deficit of 50. Okay, so silver is a great example of a continuing deficit as demand continues to grow for it. Particularly because of, not that I support it necessarily, but EVs and solar are accounting between 20 and 30% of all demand, not to mention all the other electronics that we live on. Dave and I wouldn't be talking on this computer now if it weren't for electronics and all these precious metals and stuff. And neither would you guys. You wouldn't have your microwave and you wouldn't have all the other devices that you're used to if it weren't for mining. What can I say?
Yeah, but it's archaic. We don't need that anymore.
The whole modern economy would not be where it's at right now if it weren't for these precious metals, guys. We couldn't even conduct electricity without
Not even so precious. Things that people don't think are precious, like copper. Copper, you could argue, is one of the most useful commodity metals out there.
So I guess I'm a moron and neophyte. I consider copper in a way, maybe not like gold, but a precious metal. I do, because it's intricate to a lot of things we need it for.
And it's 35 cents an ounce right now versus $30 an ounce, which goes to being more precious because the price is, it actually allows, think about this, before we allowed China into the WTO, you would have to buy something made in America or one of the countries we traded with, and you might have to pay $25 for a toaster. Or I remember when in my business, I needed laser printers for labels, and Brady label printer back then was like $1,000.
I remember vaguely. I do.
And when China started making Brady label, the cost went to like $70. Huge deflation.
Isn't
And
that
so,
something?
yeah, it is. And so we've been basically we've exported our inflation to these other places. We've relied on a slave class, and that's what the world has always done. The higher income societies have always had a slave class. Look at history. They may or may not have been called slaves, but they lived like slaves.
But in effect, but in effect, no, you could argue that because take a pair of Nikes. You've heard this example many times. The average pair of Nike sneakers is what, 75 to $100 even now, right? For brand new, right? Right? Unless you go to discount shoes or whatever. But
Right.
$80 to $100, even till this day, whether it's being made in China, maybe they've sent it to Vietnam now. What's it cost them to make it? $5, $3?
Yeah, their marketing probably cost is more than what they pay to make the shoe.
Yeah. So let's say, I'll be devil's advocate. Let's say for the cost of materials, the labor, the marketing involved, blah, 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 overhead, whatever, running the plant, $10 to produce them. They're selling them for 100, guys. Right? We agree. In the West, Western Europe and the US and Canada, Australia, whatever, are buying them for $100. So what are they paying the 17-year-old in the Chinese or Vietnamese or the 20-year-old in the Vietnamese factory if the total cost is $10?
Buck a day if they're lucky.
Not a hell of a lot. Not a hell of a lot.
So why would those people work for $1 a day when, Dan, you would not work for less than $1,000 a day? I'm just picking numbers, right? I mean, what's wrong with those people?
Well, exactly. And in the
Why
West,
do they choose to be a member of the slave class?
well, they didn't, but to answer your question in twofold, I couldn't work for $1 a day even if I wanted to. I mean, you'd be out on the street in milliseconds.
That's where I'm going with this. Is none of us choose this. We're a product of our environment. And so when people say, well, that would never happen in the United States, I would never choose to work for $1 a day. Well, guess what? Those people don't choose to work for $1 a day either. And as Dan knows, as you learn when you trade, money does what, Dan? It never dies.
Well, it rotates.
It rotates.
Velocity.
It rotates. It goes from one place to another, just as into various assets. And you could argue, so do societies. Societies rotate. They live, they die. Money rotates. The United States was a good, safe bet for a lot of decades. This is where the world went. And maybe that's what we're watching right now. We're watching the world decide that the United States is no longer the future, which is bad for your children, bad for your grandchildren.
That's a tough pill to swallow. But I do think that's a distinct possibility because if you know, and I'm not advocating this obviously, but if you know rudimentary history of the world, guys, you know that every empire or power, I won't call us necessarily an empire, but a world power, has come and gone, plain and simple, colloquial terms. No, I don't have a PhD in history, but I do know basic world history, in which I've even been chastised by certain friends and family. Oh, that was 500 years ago. That was 1,000 years ago. Matter. It does matter. That's the point. It does matter.
Yeah, and the speed of movement, like that compounding video that Dr. Chris Martenson has, is so powerful, which talks about how quickly Yankee Stadium fills with water when it's being compounded. You're on mute. So I'll just talk because he's doing something else. So everybody should go and watch that video because it talks about the speed of movement and how quickly things can fall apart. Faster than you can move. And you might think you're fast, but it's kind of like you. Have you ever played with a cat? And you try to touch a cat, and that cat, no matter how fast you are, that cat will always hit your hand, no matter how quickly. And that's how quickly money rotates when it moves, when it decides to move. And that's why, I had to learn this the hard way because, you never want to be leveraged, folks. And leverage is debt. If you have debt, like people will say, I laugh every time I hear this. You're an idiot for paying off your mortgage. Take the money and invest it, and you'll make a higher rate of return than the 3% mortgage you have. That is assuming you know the future. Now, if you want to base probabilities, but if you want to guarantee, and again, we get into property taxes, etc., but the guarantee is you get rid of your debt and you have a guaranteed ROI there. Guaranteed ROI. Whereas you take the 200 grand you could have paid off your mortgage, you put it into Tesla, and Tesla drops 25%. And now you sold it and you're down 25%. I would have been better just paying off my mortgage and taking the 3%. See, people think they're smarter than they are, or they think that luck is brilliance, like your parents. Right? Your parents were brought at that moment in time. Your parents were in the right place at the right time. Just like a lot of life. Life is what happens while we're making other plans, as they say.
So to that point, I think there's truth to that because, back in the day, most baby boomers, guys, not to be derogatory, could graduate from high school. That's it. That's all they needed. Or maybe a little bit of schooling after that, Votech, maybe an extra year or two. And they could make a living at a company for 30 years, 40 years, and get a pension. And in the meantime, buy a house in which houses at that time were probably on average 3 times your income, right? Well, the problem now is houses are 8 to 10 times the average person's income.
It was like one to 3 times. Because I remember my father said he paid $5,000 for the house in Weymouth, and he was making $5,000 a year back in 1959.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So the average millennial now, and never mind the Gen Z when it's their time, they're in the 7 to 10 times range, easy. And everybody wonders why they can't buy a house. Hey, in the older the baby boomers, I use my parents constantly as an example because it's a microcosm example. It's right there. It's real. It's tangible. Comments like, "Oh well, you're a sluffer. You can't afford the house." Yeah, it's 10 times the effing income, guys. It was like 3 times yours, and they'll debate you on it. No, it wasn't. Yes, it was. You don't know the numbers. Things have gone out of whack. Actually, real wages have gone down since the 70s. They don't get that.
Yep.
Wages have gone down, but costs have gone up.
Which coincides with the removal of gold as the backing, and also with the death of unions, right? So 100%. all of that.
Great point. Workers are on their own. Don't open your mouth because most states now are right to work. What is it? Right to work or something like that? Basically, the employer can fire you.
Yeah, at will employment. Yeah.
At will employment can fire you for any reason or cause. It's not like the old days with our dads, where if you got laid off, if you did get laid off, it was performance. You were total stiff, Now you could be a decent worker,
drunk,
and a good performer, and you just get laid off because they got to make their quarterly numbers. And some bean counter in New Jersey or whatever, decided, nothing against New Jersey, but decided to, we got to pump up the profits 0.7%.
Well, if a company
So
wants to
lay
cut
off 247 people, Mac, and you'll make it. And Wall Street will reward us with $2 more on the stock price.
well, if a company needs to cut their costs, labor is one of the first things to go.
100%. And that's why Gruesome Newsom in California has never run a popsicle stand. It doesn't get it. When he raised the minimum wage overnight from $15 to $20 just recently, and
Except for his buddies. His buddies are exempt.
Why is everybody firing the workers? I gave them more money. Yeah, you idiot, because the people running the company, their cost basis just went up 33% overnight. Unless they can increase their top line revenue 33% on a dime, like right away, they can't cover the costs, knucklehead. So they've got to reduce the staff.
And it's more than that, because labor is a fraction, and you have to add all your overhead and your burden on top of it.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. No, I get it, but I'm just saying in general terms, that's what you're looking at.
So Dan and I have gotten into this diatribe, but the real reason that Dan and I are talking is we're talking about specific investments, because anybody who's watched any of our videos, now Dan, I haven't watched all of our videos in a long time, but I'm pretty sure we were saying 5-10 years ago, everybody should own some gold, some silver, some crypto, because it's a diversification, right? It's not putting your eggs all in one basket. It's basically putting money into something that will hopefully maintain its value as the cost of everything skyrockets, right? Your wealth is protected. And so now, as we're starting to see that, now what's happened in the past is the powers that be, the banks, they've been able to manipulate, in the United States and London, and they've been able to manipulate everything by using derivatives, paper contracts. There's more paper contracts than there are physical ounces of anything.
100%.
So you dump quadrillion ounces of anything in the paper market, it kills the price. But now what has happened in the last week, and I sent you the video, I don't know if you watched it, but the Chinese started saying, okay, we will pay $3 more for an ounce of silver than what the West is, than what New York and London are saying.
$3 or $4 more, yeah. So
where do you think the silver is going to flow to?
West to east.
It's called arbitrage. Arbitrage is when you buy something for $1 here and sell it for $2 here. It's the essence of what merchants and traders have been doing for centuries.
Wax off.
Yeah. So at some point, what that does is that now forces all of these people who are short or trying to control the commodity price using paper.
Are you calling me short?
It means that if I am short 1 million ounces of silver and I don't have the silver, I have to pay that contract out of my pocket. I can't just deliver the silver because they don't have it. And I'm just using silver, but it could be anything good. It means that real things have real value. And that's what I said about Bitcoin before. Real things have real value when you need it. If there's a need, like oxygen, if oxygen all of a sudden became valuable, if water all of a sudden became where all the water was polluted and I had no means to get clean water, all of a sudden the price of water would go through the roof.
Or if Dave didn't have access to his Euro bikini briefs.
Yeah, well, I can go nude. Yeah. My point is that obviously need is above all.
True. Yeah, we all need a roof. We all need to eat.
Maslow.
We all need,
right?
Yeah. Maslow's Pavlov's
hierarchy of needs. The triangle.
Yeah. Food, clothing, and housing.
And that's in essence, when things get confusing, That's why religion and spirituality have existed for thousands and thousands of years, because people have always returned to the base, to the roots, to ground themselves. And when things get confusing, go back to what has worked over time as far as words of wisdom. And so you slow the speed down and you pull yourself in. You de-risk yourself. And that's why you don't want to be leveraged. And anytime you make a bet on Bitcoin or copper or silver, realize that you could lose that. You could lose that money. But we're at the point now, Dan, where if you don't take those gambles, you're going to lose anyways, right? If you're on a fixed income, or if you work for somebody else, you collect a W-2, you collect a check, you don't control your future.
No, you don't. And that's why you have to find ways to keep up with what I call the hurdle rate, the 15% or more. Trading is one of the few ways to do that, provided you're doing it right, so to speak.
Well, regardless, I mean, if Weimar said, hey, I only have to keep up with 5% or 15%, that escalated pretty quickly, didn't it? Venezuela, that escalated pretty quickly. I mean, Mexico, where I am, there were times where the price of everything went up significantly. Price of tortillas doubled. Now that's like, who gives a shit? The price of tortillas doubled. Well, guess what? For people who were making 5 pesos or like 50 pesos a day, 100 pesos a day, that mattered.
Absolutely. It's all relative. Yeah.
And that's the point I'm trying to make. It is all relative.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Jeff Bezos, you won't notice, or Bill Gates, extreme examples.
What we're seeing right now, and that's what I'm trying to get through to people by saying we're the Titanic. The pain that you're feeling now economically, if you're feeling it, it's nothing compared to what's coming. Watch that compounding video. Look at history. I mean, it's what history has shown. So
that's pretty scary.
Well, most people, I mean, even people who have like $500,000 in cash in the bank, that's not going to be enough.
No. Well, the reality is, if you have 500 G's right now,
if you're going to live a while, I mean, if you're going to live a year, fine, you'll be okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Dave, if let's say you got 500 G's in the bank right now, and you're a boomer getting ready to retire, you think, oh yeah, I'm all set. Well, maybe if you're 75, maybe, but
especially if you don't have kids.
Let's say you're 55 or 50 with 500,000. Oh, I'm all set. No, you're really not. You're not, because you're probably going to live another 25, 30 years. 500K ain't going to do it. I mean,
especially if you get sick.
50 G's a year, that's 10 years. Yeah. Well, that's the other problem in the US, and we don't need to diatribe. I mean, people go poor all the time. Our healthcare system sucks. We tout that it's so great. Well, why is it half the people go poor now because of healthcare? You only got to have one bad illness and you're screwed. 500 grand, they could go through that in a year or less.
There's 3 months, 6 months. Yeah, there's too many stories of that. Too many stories.
Yeah, you can piss through that in 3 months.
Yeah, I've heard, I don't know if it's true, I've heard it's one of the largest leading causes of bankruptcy in the country is medical bankruptcy. And with all the jabs, all the people who are hurt by those, who's going to pay for those injuries? They can't even get out of bed. So the point this is all, for most people, even for us, Dan, it's a little overwhelming, but we've been talking and dealing with this for over a decade, 15 years now.
It's overwhelming. Never mind the average bear that is waking up right now.
Well, it's why I've said to you, why were all those military guys putting a gun in their mouth. What was it, 10 a day, 20 a day at one point?
22.
Why? Because they lived their whole lives under a certain code, certain Bushido, certain paradigm. And they found out it's all a lie. And imagine putting your whole life into something and then realizing it's a lie. How do you reset? How do you start? Some people do. Some people can lose everything and get up and brush themselves off, but most people don't. Most people are finished. Most people are so downtrodden and destroyed they can't recover. And like those videos you send me of these dudes who volunteer to go to Ukraine and they're dead. How was that decision? They left families, left wives, left children.
And that's why I sent you the videos. I just couldn't believe it. One guy went over there. He was a Brazilian guy, actually, in the last year or two to go fight on the side of the Ukraine. He had 7 children. I'm not judging him. I'm just saying, God bless him. He had 7 children. Granted, he was separated at the time from his old lady.
Yeah.
That
tell you
might
how
have
much
been
he
part of the
thought.
reason,
Tell you how
you
much
know.
he thought about his children.
Yeah, it's like, dude, what are you doing?
Priorities.
I mean, shouldn't you be at home trying to work hard to support yourself and your
It's
family?
why.
I mean,
Well, it's a perfect example of why this world is the
you're
way
gonna
it
go
is.
fight for friggin' Zelensky that was installed
No,
as a puppet? Really?
it's in a majority of people on this planet have bought into the lies and have been complicit because they have financially benefited from it. So it was not. I mean, if you're making money, if you're not the guy in Vietnam, you're the guy in wherever. Your incomes have been going up. Your assets have been going up. You have been doing well. So of course you're going to believe it, and until you don't. And that's what we're watching now through the jabs, through these false Russian claims, and soon to be false China claims coming next. Because let's face it, we're running out of boogeymen. The Taliban, Al Qaeda, that kind of wore off. Nobody really that lost teeth after a couple of years. That's why they went back to Russia. Does anybody think about this? Wow, Russia worked for 50 years. Let's go back to Russia. Let's go back to China. Yeah. The terrorism stuff gets boring after a while. People can't sink their teeth into that until the power grid comes down. But so the question of time, how I mean, we're watching it happen right now. Since Biden and his illustrious administration implemented sanctions on Russia, when the rest of the world basically started pivoting at that point. They started pivoting away from the US, away from the dollar, away from the West. And that's what led to the BRICS Plus, which are only going to grow in the future. So we're watching that happen, but this is where that compounding video, the speed of movement, how quickly is this? I mean, back in the 2008 financial crash, back at 9/11, back with the gold standard, who knew when the U.S. went off the gold standard that Kissinger was able to pivot to the petrodollar?
Yeah, petrodollar.
Which kept it afloat for another 30 years, 40 years. So who knows what's going to happen, how long, but this could literally, I've been saying for years now, it's going to take an external force. And we saw that external force with the rest of the world saying, no mas, no mas. We're not going to just blindly believe in the dollar. And they still do to a certain extent. But my point is the rotation that we're watching, Dan, I have no idea how long this rotation is going to take. And you probably don't either. But it's happening. But it's happening. It's the motion is it's already set. It's already going. And it's just a question of is it going to be in our lifetime or not? Or whatever our standard lifetime is. Is it going to take 5 years? Is it going to take a year? Is it going to take 2 years? Well, nobody saw the Russian invasion of Ukraine coming until it happened. And that changed the world. just like nobody saw COVID coming until it happened. So if you're not preparing yourself, and there are certain, I mean, it's you have to at least try. You have to at least try. So go ahead, Dan.
No argument to that. The problem is, I do think America as a whole is starting to wake up a little bit, but I don't think enough.
America as a whole?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What is that on a percentage basis? 51%, you're saying?
No, I do see more Americans starting to wake up, actually. I talk to people every day on the phones. But what that percentage is, I don't know.
I don't know. I see the opposite because I told you, I don't know if I've said this on a video. I probably have. I see a lot of people coming to Mexico who tell me, these are older people who tell me they're looking for property down here because if Trump gets in, they're moving to Mexico. That doesn't sound like they've learned anything. Because they're still buying. Great. They're still buying into. Now, I'm not getting into a Trump thing because there are pros and cons to Trump. There are pros and cons to Kennedy. Well, I can't see any pros in Biden. Anybody who votes for Biden has their head up their
butt. He's a disaster. Yeah, he and Kamala have been.
And it's not just that. It's their administration. When your focus is on being the most diverse administration in the history of mankind, that's like saying, "Hey, Dan, I like your pink hair. Go fly the airplane." Well, I don't know how to fly a plane. Who cares? You have pink hair.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, I know it's scary. Yeah, the quota was filled. The quota was filled. I'm diverse. I've got a nose ring and pink hair and a belly button ring, and I pierced my boobs. Sorry. But I can't fly the plane. We need somebody to fly the plane. I've been identified as the plane flyer because I checked off the other boxes.
Well, you couldn't pass the class, so we created a remedial class that you passed. You were able to sign your name. So you passed. You're qualified.
I used an X.
Lower the standards.
X marks the spot.
Well, if you look at history, I mean, when you see what kids used to have to study, like just 200 years ago, you think, oh, they were retarded, dumb shits back then. They were studying like the classics. They were studying Greek and Latin and the Bible and is for history and right. I mean, they weren't studying,
Macbeth, Beethoven, Romeo.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a reason why they're called classics.
We're out there. Oh, Romeo.
Although Shakespeare stole most of his works, but another thing, what is it? Appropriation. He's appropriating. Well, that goes to folks. The winners write the history. So none of us know the real history. None of us know the real history because we didn't live back then. And on a side note, Dan, I don't know if I told you I started writing again.
Yeah, you told me.
Yep. I stopped writing book number 2 because I don't want to get into that. But book number 3, I'll just say book number 3 is talking about the things that we're talking about now, but in a fictional setting. It's a very interesting book, which is why I'm excited to write it. It's just time consuming. But so Dan, now after an hour of talking, what I really wanted to talk to you about is, listen, I've been in silver for a long time, and I have been punched in the face so many times. And I think that's why the miners aren't running, because the people have been kicked in the groin and the face and the teeth so many times. They don't believe it. They don't believe this is finally, what is it, the boy who cried wolf? They've been told it's the real time so many times, they just don't believe it. So Friday, I thought was a terrifying event and exciting at the same time, because silver has been destroyed over the last 15 years when it got near $30 an ounce. It blew through that $30 an ounce like a hot knife through butter on Friday. And I'm watching it saying, what is happening? What is happening? And the only thing I can come up with, Dan, is the story about China that I talked about, is the Chinese have forced those people. Because think about it, Dan. If you're worried about something in front of you and somebody comes up behind you and starts sticking a knife in your back, your attention is going to be diverted to the knife in your back. You're not so much worried about what's in front of you anymore. And that's what's happening is now the people who have control, now we're watching some real external forces at work. And does that mean this is a bubble? Is silver a bubble? It's going to come crashing down like GameStop or like whatever thing? Copper, if you look at the chart of copper is exploding historically. It's over $5 a pound. Is that real? I mean, has China decided that, hey, silver doesn't go bad, copper doesn't go bad, gold doesn't go bad, oil doesn't go bad. Am I better off putting my US dollars into these items that I can just put in a parking lot someplace or in a bank someplace and let sit for 100 years? Where they'll have, the reason those things have value is because they have use. I need those if I'm going to have a modern society.
Yeah.
Whereas the US dollar could go to nothing. And if you have a million, like if you had like those Zimbabwe notes, if you had $1 million Zimbabwe dollars or $1 million Venezuelan pesos or whatever they're called, real, or what is it worth now? You would have been better buying that ounce of silver. You would have been buying that pound of copper.
What do you need silver for and copper for?
My point is, whatever it is that you determine, you can actually store your energy, your wealth. Something that people need. Now, if we go back to the caveman days, you don't need silver. You don't need copper. You don't need oil. But if we're going to have a modern society, those are items that we need. And we can debate whether it's the Chinese modern society, the Russian modern society, the US, UK modern society, the Mexican modern, doesn't matter. Modern society typically is going to be an advanced society in many ways. And as you already alluded to, you need those commodities for an advanced society.
No way around it.
You don't need paper, dollars. I mean, people used to use giant stones. They used to use salt as currency.
Oh, really? Salt.
So if we talk about copper, Dan, this is a bet. If you are saying silver is at 30, we'll just call it $32 an ounce as of Friday. Copper's at $5 a pound. These are closer to the historical top than the mean. So if you do put money into these things, realize that the powers that be could hammer these things down. And you could lose money in the short term. So if you're not willing to bet it and forget it, which means you can't be leveraged, you can't be paying interest on these things. This has to be, it's like buying physical silvers of ounces of gold. When you buy a physical ounce of silver, you put it into your drawer, into your safe, wherever, not into a bank. And I wouldn't even trust it with these people who hold it. Okay. Have it someplace that only you know about. And then forget about it. And then you don't have to worry about it. It's not on your balance sheet. Treat these things as, I'm putting this amount of resources and this is going to protect me or it's going to go to zero. So that's where I see Bitcoin. This might protect me. I mean, hey, if Bitcoin does track like it's tracked over the last 10 years, you'd be crazy not to own some. The downside of not owning it is probably greater than the downside of owning it. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Same thing with silver and gold.
I would agree as well.
Live long and prosper.